So if you're catching up with the crisis at the Football Kenya Federation, here's a tale of the tape. We have an impasse. We have a standoff now, which FIFA is trying to mediate. Sometime last week, Vice President and former player Donald Mariga got himself a couple of 9 guys from the National Executive Committee, sat down and said, on the strength of allegations that were flying around against the incumbent president, Mohammed Hussein, they ousted him from office, declared him persona non grata, and said he had been ousted from office and that Mariga was now in charge. Over an alleged, $300,000 insurance scandal that we now have learned may have happened during the period of the African Nation Championship in 2024. And as a result, Mohammed was ousted, and we've had 2 judicial bodies that have stopped the process. The Sports Dispute Tribunal has issued conservatory orders preserving the status quo. A High Court order today, 28th of April, has also stopped any changes at the Federation until the matter is fully heard and determined. FIFA has also waded in, asking for documentation, asking to see whether its statutes and processes were followed in coming into this conclusion that the changes at the Football Kenya Federation were now being effected by Donald Mariga. So that is where we are at the moment. And as we speak, the incumbent besieged President Mohammed Hussein is attending the FIFA Congress in Canada, which I believe will put him in a very advantageous position to explain himself and get audience with FIFA, member federation officials, and also the Confederation of Africa officials who are there, just to put his side of the story, having won 2, conservatory orders in his favor here in Kenya. But the problem of football wrangling and leadership tussle at the federation didn't begin, this year. In fact, it had begun way back in, the 1960s and the 1970s. Those who remember, my elders, will remember in 1968, there was a caretaker committee. Because at the time it was known as Kenya Football Association. Wrangles began there. It was dissolved by a minister known as Ronald Ngala, who said money had been stolen, misappropriation of funds, and then it was suspended. Again, 1970s, a veteran politician known as Martin Shikuku, the late, wedded himself in, came in as a leader, but then again, issues of favoritism and so many others came into play, and again, the federation was again dissolved shortly after, I think in about 1972. You had Kenya Football Association, known at the time, just having so many problems again in the 1970s. And people are saying that the problems from the 1970s were never really addressed. That is why it's rearing its ugly head again. Veteran politician, Kenneth Matiba, the late Kenneth Matiba, a Kenyan respected politician of his time, fighter, for liberation, second liberation, third liberation, second liberation in Kenya, was also part and parcel of the mess of football in Kenya in the 1970s. So you had a man who in the 1972, again, caused the dissolution, of Kenya Football Association then because of financial misappropriation. Again, coming back to the 1980s, you had a lot of problems. 44 years ago, 45 years ago, 46 years ago, you had the government again coming in to intervene and dissolve, Football Kenya. So the crisis again in the 1980s playing out throughout the 80s up to early 90s. And this is where some of us remember vividly, as young boys loving football. We remember a politician known as Job Owino, who was an opposition figure at the time, but a very popular man who took helm of now known as Kenya Football Federation. And because of the wrangles at that time, we had totally lost our head as a country. We lost the Africa Cup of Nations hosting right in 1996 as a result. And we were banned by CAF, I think 3 matches or 2 tournaments at that time because of the same problem. So you have a situation which progressively built a problem that was cultured and nurtured progressively from the 60s, 70s through 80s and now 90s. You remember 2000, I think a lot of us remember the gentleman known as Maina Kariuki, who in 2001, I think in 2004, you have a problem with corruption, court battles, lawyers, legal challenges, and the government got enough of all the drama and, suspended Kenya. Remember in 2004. And now what? FIFA intervened again. 2004, FIFA intervened, banning Kenyans like, you know what? You guys are playing too much. Football cannot be run by court battles. Football cannot be played in courts and boardrooms and whatnot. You have to have the game going in the field and all the rules must be followed. Now, during these mid-2000s, because as a result of that, you had a gentleman known as Mohammed Hatimi, the late Mohammed Hatimi, and, Sam Nyamwe. Many journalists who remember my generation remember these two protagonists who each formed a parallel body in the early 2000s, everybody running their own federation. One hand, Nyamwe running his own federation, Mohammed Hatimi running his own federation. Everybody came up with their own leagues, own offices, factions on one side, leagues on one side, competition rules on one side. You have rival bodies that everybody was trying to make a claim. And FIFA said, you know what? 2011, I had enough. And then we were banned. Now, 2011 is not far off. It's only 15 years ago. So if as recent as 15 years ago, we were still having this kind of problems that began in the 1960s, surely we are hopeless as a country. We are hopeless. We are beyond redemption. And then again, coming back, 2021, 2022, Mr. Nick Mwendwa and all the problems that followed when Amina Mohamed, the former sports minister of Kenya, disbanded Football Kenya Federation because it said there was massive embezzlement of funds. Same thing that Mohammed Hussein Mohammed and the current office are facing. Let us be clear. None of these sides look good. Mariga's camp does not look good. Mohammed Hussein camp does not look good. These are one and the same people who knew about this corruption scandal. They know the corruption scandals that are yet to be unearthed or they're yet to be made public. These guys are now fighting or speaking out for self-preservation. So it is one house known as Football Kenya Federation, and it is from where the problem has emanated. And we're going to go back again to what we had with Nick Mwendwa when the government sometime, I think it was 2021, said, you know what, we're going to dissolve you. And FIFA came banning us. FIFA suspended Kenya from February 2022 for about 9 months until the new government came in November 2022 when, efforts were made and people had to go to World Cup in Qatar to try and lift, the suspension that had been meted 9 months by, by FIFA. So we have a situation where as recent as 3-4 years ago, the problem was there. Now, we are speaking about a problem now that is threatening as it did in 1996, 30 years ago again, today, hosting of the Africa Cup of Nations. Whoever said lightning does not strike the same place twice had never seen Football Kenya Federation problems with power wrangling. And whoever said that lightning does not strike the same place twice had not been to Kenya, I suppose. Because what are the odds that exactly 30 years later, the same federation and the same tournament, Africa Cup of Nations, Kenya could lose the hosting rights again here? Because this Africa Cup of Nations is coming up next year in 2027. But at this point, we have two parallel bodies or two parallel factions that are claiming leadership of Football Kenya Federation over what? The things I've enumerated earlier on. So you have massive corruption, allegations that are coming up, and we haven't seen the last of it. I want it to be very clear and to go on record. We have not seen, in fact, we have not even begun. This is not even the tip of the iceberg. I suspect, and I've been told this by impeccable sources, that there are more corruption scandals that are going to emanate not just from Football Kenya Federation, but also from the LOC, the local organizing committee of the African Nation Championship and the Africa Cup of Nations. That we must be braced for in the coming days. So we are likely to see more scandals coming. We are likely to see more fallouts, and probably, if the authorities are doing what they should, probably some bit of litigation here could follow, and court processes criminal proceedings, in fact, should naturally follow in the coming days. So we have a federation that is fighting, cannibalizing itself. They are not even 2 years in the office. These guys were in the office in 2024, sometime in November. Now here they are. A year and I think 8 months later, they are cannibalizing, fighting among themselves. There is no way now that Mr. Hussein Mohammed and Mr. Donald Mariga can ever work again. They are done. The allegations, the attempted power coup, the power grabbing, and all these court cases will make it impossible for them and the National Executive Committee to work together again. Mr. Donald Mariga took 9 members of the National Executive Committee to his side, who signed orders kicking out Hussein Mohammed from the federation. Hussein was left with probably 3, out of 12. So that is a minority. But he has the final laugh at this point. No one knows for how long this smile or this relief is going to last. But here's the point. These wrangles come just weeks after Kenya, signed some bit of irrevocable guarantees with the Confederation of African Football to host the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations. Kenya paid the hosting rights fee of about $30 million, to the Confederation of African Football. The minister confirmed that, and this country is now beginning the very next aggressive steps to hosting the Africa Cup of Nations. Before these wrangles began, the stadium were to be closed. Main facilities were now about to undergo renovations, and a lot of trainings were going on, a lot of sensitization, a lot of a lot of undercurrents were really going on in terms of organizing, getting to secure contracts with sponsors, suppliers, and so many other people. The league is heading to its conclusion. So you have a federation that is caught in a crossfire, a cannibalistic kind of situation where they are now eating up themselves from within. This is happening at the time that Kenya women's football team, the Harambee, Starlets, is preparing for the Africa Women's Cup of Nations in Morocco in 4 weeks' time. You have the Kenya under-17 team that is in a very good position to qualify, for the FIFA World Cup that's going to be due in Morocco again this year. You also have the league that is about to end, and stakes couldn't be higher at this particular point. You have staff at the federation, you have suppliers, you have creditors, you have a lot of ecosystem that depend on the functionality of football that have currently, stopped. We have also learned today that the staff of the federation have been asked to work from home, and the anti-graft body raided Football Kenya Federation, to try and look for evidence and stuff like that. Let's be clear. Order stopping takeover of Football Kenya Federation does not stop other independent commissions from undertaking their own investigations, of course, which they can do at any particular point in time. As a report was filed by one party alleging some serious, financial mess by another party. So here we are. We also have programs that were about to begin. The FIFA project, in Machakos, and so many others that were about to begin. Kenya could get itself in a very tight situation in the coming days. I'm imagining that FIFA or CAF may not want to suspend Kenya at this particular point. But if their hands are tied in the coming days and make it very impossible for them not to, then they will. If people go to court and seek these orders to stop football from being, then FIFA abhors that. And FIFA really takes a very dim view of those kind of court processes. And they have pronounced themselves very clearly, not just in Kenya, Zimbabwe, and so many other countries have felt the wrath of FIFA. And even the kind of, the FIFA Congress now happening in Canada will also discipline some members because of that. So Kenya is no exception. And I keep telling my people that Kenya is not special in any form, shape, or manner. We are not very special in the world of football. We do not have the pedigree that other people do have. And we are not a special member of FIFA in any way. In fact, hosting the Africa Cup of Nations for us was a favor being granted, by CAF and others, and we saw how much we struggle, in fact, hosting the African Nation Championship. Other countries around the region are standing by for spoils. It is my theory. It is my theory that despite the irrevocable guarantees which Kenya has signed with CAF, which CAF also signed with Cameroon in 2021 and Egypt and Equatorial Guinea and other countries that have lost the hosting rights of AFCON in the past, East Africa will host the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations. Now, East Africa is not solely Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. There are other countries within East Africa that could step in and comfortably rescue this competition. You need to understand why Morocco has hosted many events, many African football events in the last few years. It is because they are able to stand up and be counted when they are needed. When they show capacity, CAF will lean towards that. CAF will lean towards the good of the game. CAF will cut Kenya out as soon as possible if Kenya threatens the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations. This country will be thrown out and discarded like bird habit. CAF does not have a sense of humor when it comes to the Africa Cup of Nations. You need to look around and read the precedents that has characterized this Africa Cup of Nations hosting rights. Just look at the last 15 years, you will get a clearer picture. So Kenya is not special, and we cannot sit here and pretend that just because we've paid $30 million that we cannot lose the hosting rights. And all indications are such that we are taking ourselves to the slaughterhouse. We are fighting within amongst ourselves under the federation, which is a host federation. FIFA and CAF deal with member federations. It does not deal with government directly. So through the LOC and the host federation, FIFA and CAF work to prepare for the Africa Cup of Nations. And the recent changes at the LOC gave us a first indication that things are not well at the Football Kenya Federation. Now we've been vindicated. Those suspicions are coming true. Now, there were earlier complaints that the football officials had been sidelined from hosting or preparing, for the African Nation Championship in 2025. Now, changes were made at the LOC, and all members, nearly 98%, let's say over 90%, of football governing officials in Kenya were incorporated in the local organizing committee of the Africa Cup of Nations in 2027. And these are the same fellows that have now caused a change of leadership, illicit as it were, as of this time, because it's been stopped by court of Football Federation. So we are back to the rat hole. We are back to square one. We have turned letter O upside down. Keep giving that example at every turn, because it is going to amount to nothing. Now, here is what I suspect is going to happen. Some people are going to lose out, and big time. Hussein or Mariga, one of them, will have to give way. The federation will stand. The LOC will continue. The Africa Cup of Nations preparations for 2027 will continue unless otherwise stated, unless other factors make it impossible for Kenya to host the Africa Cup of Nations. Mr. Hussein Mohammed or Mr. Donald Mariga cannot stop the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations from happening, from being by their conduct or by their continued struggle for power. So those two individuals are dispensable, and very much so. This country has bigger ambitions and prospects that those in leadership and authority must ensure it prevails over personal ambitions and, insatiable appetite for power. This country cannot afford to make the mistake it did 30 years ago of losing the hosting rights for the Africa Cup of Nations. We cannot go back there. We shouldn't go back there. We cannot go back there, and we should never allow ourselves to go back there. If we need to clean a few people and clear them from the federation, then let it be. We still have a lot of time. The National Federation can be disbanded and fresh mandate be called for elections, and those who want to come in will be called in to continue. If Hussein Mohammed and McDonald Mariga cannot work at least to deliver AFCON 2027, then we must call for fresh elections at the Football Kenya Federation, have new mandate, have fresh mandate, and let new people come in and continue the business of football in Kenya. Kenyans must not allow the Africa Cup of Nations to be jeopardized by the power struggle between Mr. Hussein Mohammed and Mr. Donald Mariga and members of the National Executive Committee. That group of people is very much dispensable. The rest of us are not. The rest of the country is not. And CAF and FIFA must put Kenya first in their determination of the problem bedeviling Football Kenya Federation as of this time. In the coming days, I suspect, as we have seen, maybe CAF or maybe FIFA, particularly FIFA, will show Kenya some bit of grace in delaying banning Kenya and making it the last resort if there will be this alternative dispute resolution mechanism that are going to be put in place to babysit the national federations to deliver the Africa Cup of Nations in 2027 and then leave them to the elements. That could be a welcome move. As of this particular point, we just want to hop, step, and jump and get to 2027 and host the Africa Cup of Nations. Anything else are details. And if these two protagonists cannot work together, then we have a year or less before the Africa Cup of Nations. These two can quit or be made to quit, and the rest of us can move forward as we seek new people to continue. Number two, FIFA could decide to put Kenya under a normalization committee, which will then oversee the preparations for the Africa Cup of Nations. It has happened in the past. It will happen again in future if Kenya Football Federation and Football Kenya Federation officials do not stop their childish fight for power at the federation. So a normalization committee could be put in place to babysit the hopes of this nation and to transition Kenya through this turbulent period to the Africa Cup of Nations and beyond, after which then elections could be called and a fresh mandate perhaps be sought. So in the coming days, we expect also to see this kind of developments. But also here's a point. The government of Kenya has adopted an hands-off approach because it understands the perils of attempting to interfere with matters of football. That will attract automatic ban from FIFA. It has happened in the past, and they do not want a repeat of the same. So government will take a cautious approach. The minister saying he doesn't even know who is in charge anymore. The federation have not told him anything, so he's reading, these things through this, perhaps this communication, or through media reports. And I think that is a sober approach. Otherwise, anything rushed at this particular point could be premature and expensive. This perhaps could also be speaking about the leadership of the sports ministry. And just wonder yourself, where was our intelligence reports, before we go to this point? Could government have worked behind the scenes to try and bring sanity in football before we got here? Did the recent shake-up at the LOC precipitate this kind of problems that we have? No one knows for sure, but only time will tell.